One.
Good day to everybody everywhere. Thank you for joining us once again here for the Shang Institute School of Tibetan Medicine webinar series. Here we discuss topics of health and wellness, exploring tools from Eastern and Western traditions, from ancient philosophies and classical texts of traditional medicine, along with modern research and current issues in global public health. This week, we welcome an exciting panel of special guests to discuss the relationship between chronic stress and cancer from the perspectives of modern medical research, clinical oncology, traditional Tibetan medicine, yoga, meditation, complementary care, and more. Our panel today brings together a lot of talent and experience from all around the world, so I am really excited. Before we begin, let me introduce ourselves and welcome you. On behalf of the Shang Institute School of Tibetan Medicine, we offer professional training courses and programs on traditional Tibetan medicine at our various centers around the world and online. Our courses range from short lectures, continuing education classes for medical professionals, all the way to our full-length 4-year professional training program in Tibetan medicine. Our courses at the Shang Institute School are modeled after the traditional Tibetan medicine schools in Tibet and India and are taught directly from the authentic classical texts of Tibetan medicine. We are a dedicated team of experienced Tibetan medicine practitioners and are passionate about sharing the beauty and wisdom of Tibetan medicine with the world. I'd like to take a moment to honor our beloved and inspired Institute founder and spiritual teacher, Chogyal Namkhai Norbu. The Shang Institute exists today entirely because of the vision and tireless work of our beloved founder and spiritual teacher, Chogyal Namkhai Norbu Rinpoche. Chogyal Namkhai Norbu was one of the world's leading scholars of Tibetan culture and master of the spiritual heritage of Tibetan Buddhism and Dzogchen teachings. Rinpoche spearheaded groundbreaking research in the field of ancient Tibetan culture. He founded multiple international organizations for education, cultural preservation, and humanitarian relief. Chogyal Namkhai Norbu shared the precious teachings of Tibetan Buddhism and Dzogchen with many thousands of students worldwide over several decades, founding the international Dzogchen community with major centers in numerous countries around the world. Rinpoche worked tirelessly to proliferate the wisdom and culture of the Tibetan traditions, as well as to benefit directly the diaspora of Tibetan people in their homeland and abroad. Rinpoche's work filled many volumes, touched many lives, and spanned decades. I have no doubt that his teachings will resound for many years to come, and it is our honor to carry on his legacy with the Shang Institute School of Tibetan Medicine. So for more information about our school, our background, our international community, and our programs, please visit us at tibetanmedicineschool.org. Please follow us on Facebook. You can follow us on YouTube, and please join our email list for more important updates about our courses and programs. We have exciting things in the works, and we greatly appreciate your support and would love to collaborate with you. Also, I'd like to take a moment to mention the American Tibetan Medical Association, ATMA. ATMA is a national professional organization providing resources for Tibetan medicine practitioners, patients, and supporters in the United States. You can find a qualified Tibetan medicine practitioner in your local area. You can learn more about Tibetan medicine, and you can look up qualified educational courses all through ATMA. So we are now accepting memberships professionally, student and supporting memberships. We would love to have you, your support and join us in the international Tibetan medicine community. So please do check out ATMA, the American Tibetan Medical Association. Finally, before we begin, I would like to acknowledge that we are hosting our webinar today on a very special day. Today is an important holiday here in the United States and beyond. For those of you internationally who may not be familiar, today is Juneteenth. Juneteenth holiday honors the liberation of African Americans from centuries of institutionalized slavery in the United States. It is a day which celebrates specifically African American freedom, justice, and achievements, but also a universal sense of empowerment, personal growth, spiritual development, and a sense of rising to the challenge of building a better future for the whole world. So we are honored and delighted to host our special guests here today on this auspicious holiday. Okay, so on this week, our panel, we are here to discuss the relationship between chronic stress and cancer. Stress, anxiety, and fear are quite prevalent in our world today, with many complicated issues and affecting us very much. So how do these disturbing emotions become risk factors for the development of chronic disease and harming our health over the long term? Or how do they become complicating factors in the treatment of and recovery from chronic disease? And most of all, what can we do about this to ameliorate this situation? So today our guests will share insights from their brilliant careers and years of experience to help us delve into these questions. We're delighted to have our panel today, and to all of our guests around the world, we're delighted to have you. Thank you so much for joining us. So without further ado, I am very happy to introduce our panel. First, let me introduce our keynote speaker, Dr. Debu Tripathy. Dr. Debu Tripathy is professor of medicine and chair of the Department of Breast Medical Oncology at the University of Texas MD Anderson Cancer Center. His clinical research focuses on the evaluation and development of novel therapeutics in breast cancer treatment. Dr. Tripathy is part of a multidisciplinary team of breast cancer specialists dedicated to patient-centered, personalized approaches to care. He has a long-standing interest in traditional medicine, integrative oncology, the study of botanicals, and complementary approaches for breast cancer treatment. Dr. Tripathy has conducted clinical trials in botanical medicine and Tibetan medicine, including a study of the benefits of Tibetan medicine in breast cancer treatment in collaboration with the famous and beloved Tibetan doctor Yeshe Donden. Dr. Tripathy has published many original laboratory and clinical research articles in the area of breast cancer. He serves as editor-in-chief of Cure magazine. He has previously served as president of the American Society of Breast Disease and the Society of Integrative Oncology. Dr. Tripathy, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Adam. It's a pleasure to be here, and welcome to all your viewers. It's really a wonderful day and event for us.
Excellent. We are honored. Thank you. So also we have with us today, we are delighted to have Dr. Alejandro Chaol, PhD. Dr. Chaol is the Huffington Foundation Endowed Director of the Mind, Body, Spirit Institute at the Jung Center of Houston, where they bring a new approach for helping healthcare professionals, supporting them to flourish by reducing stress and burnout, improving health, resilience, and nourishing the human spirit. He has 20 years of experience at the University of Texas MD Anderson Cancer Center as an assistant professor and director of education, integrative medicine program, Department of Palliative, Rehabilitation, and Integrative Medicine. He is also an adjunct professor, adjunct faculty member at the McGovern Center for Humanities and Ethics, where he teaches medical students in the areas of spirituality, complementary, and integrative medicine and end-of-life care. Very crucial work. They need that over there. Dr. Chaol has taught at the Rice University, the University of Houston, and the Jung Center of Houston. Since 1995, he has been teaching Tibetan meditation and Tibetan yogic practices under the auspice of the Ligming Cha Institute. Dr. Chaol is the author of several books, including Chud Practice in the Bon Tradition and Tibetan Yoga for Health and Well-Being, and others. Dr. Chaol has recently been recognized as a fellow at the Mind and Life Institute. Dr. Chaol, thank you so much for being with us today. It's an honor. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Adam. Thank you, Phuntsog Wangmo. Thank you for having me.
And then we would like to welcome back, as always, Menpa Phuntsog Wangmo. Menpa Phuntsog Wangmo is a practitioner of traditional Tibetan medicine with over 30 years of experience in clinical practice as well as teaching. She received her advanced degree from the Lhasa University School of Traditional Medicine. Menpa Wangmo is the director of the Shang Institute School of Tibetan Medicine. She teaches Tibetan medicine around the world. She has developed programs and taught students internationally. Menpa Phuntsog Wangmo is also the co-founder of the American Tibetan Medical Association, ATMA, the Tibetan Medicine Professional Association, providing resources for practitioners and supporters of traditional Tibetan medicine here in the United States. Menpa Wangmo, I have received many teachings on traditional Tibetan medicine from Menpa, and I can honestly say that here at the Shang Institute School of Tibetan Medicine, we would not be here today if not for the tireless and inspired work and beautiful example of Menpa Phuntsog Wangmo. So with our deepest appreciation, Menpa, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for joining us. Finally, I would like to welcome our special guest, Dr. Benedetta Tagliabue. Dr. Benedetta is an inspired and celebrated architect whose work includes iconic buildings, public spaces, and restorations throughout Europe. She holds an honorary Doctorate of Arts degree from Napier University. Dr. Tagliabue has published various works and received an impressive list of awards. Presently, she teaches at the University of Architecture in Barcelona. Dr. Tagliabue has recently completed a wonderful project, an innovative supportive care center for cancer treatment patients. This project, called the Calida Center, is located next to the beautiful and historic Hospital de San Paolo y de la Santa Cruz in Barcelona. This center is a restorative, intentional space for cancer patients, a beautiful space offering restive complementary care such as yoga, meditation, quiet, sacred space, and healing practices in a beautiful, natural retreat environment. So Dr. Tagliabue, thank you so much for joining us. It's wonderful to have you today.
Thank you very much, Adam. It is wonderful for me. Thank you.
So this is wonderful. I'm really excited to have this wonderful panel with us. So let's begin. I would like to start our discussion with Dr. Chaol. Dr. Chaol, you have done some wonderful work for decades at the MD Anderson Cancer Center. And would you like to tell us a little bit about that, please?
Can you hear me?
Yes, I hear you now. That's good.
Yes, and I'm sharing the screen. Yeah.
Yes, it looks quite good.
Thank you. Well, first of all, I wanted to thank Namka Rinpoche. He was one of my teachers for many years, and probably a very influential one for my both personal growth as well as my career. Phuntsog Wangmo, thank you so much. And it's great to be also with two colleagues I consider friends, both Debu and Bene. So thank you very much. I'm really honored to be part of this panel. And what I like to share, as Adam, as you were saying, is some of the work that I've been doing at the Texas Medical Center, particularly at MD Anderson, bringing some of the Tibetan mind-body practices to our patients and caregivers. So I wanted to start by, this is a beautiful, our beautiful monastery called Mendri Monastery in India. Mendri means medicine mountain. And this is one of the places that I had being trained in Tibetan yoga, and with some of the teachers that I'll mention in a moment. And I want to say this is a little bit is like bringing these practices that come from this context. Sometimes I would say from caves to the clinic, from monasteries to from the Himalayas back to the clinic. And how are we doing it in a way that is evidence-based? And so, of course, there's a lot of people that we need to thank, from my teachers, my colleagues, both at Ligmincha Institute, like Tenzin Wangyal Rinpoche, that I'll mention in a moment again, and Lorenzo Cohen and Gabriel Lopez, who are still at the Integrative Medicine program. And Lorenzo founded the Integrative Medicine program at MD Anderson, and it's been a great colleague and mentor. And of course, for me, the whole story started when we invited His Holiness Dalai Lama to Argentina in 1992. That's where I'm originally from. That's where I met Namkha Norbu Rinpoche as well. And he kind of put a little seed of how important Tibetan medicine is in terms of bringing this nonviolent way into our lifestyle, and how mind-body practices were part of that as well. Now, these are my teachers. So in the first slide, you see Lopon Tenzin Namdak, who's 95 years old. I just came back. I was lucky to be see him again in Nepal in January, right before all the COVID-19 started. And next to him, Tenzin Wangyal Rinpoche, who both of them I've been with since the early 90s. And the photo, the black and white, His Holiness Lungto Tempanima, who was the abbot of Menri Monastery and who passed away recently. And so my deep appreciation, because without them, none of what I've done could be possible. And in fact, when Lorenzo asked me to start doing this kind of research, I said, let me ask my teachers, because if they are not in it, I can't be in it either. And so it is through that lineage that I'm grateful to be able to share this. And of course, a few years ago, we were in Barcelona. Actually, Phuntsog Wangmo was there. And as you can see, Bene and Namkha Norbu Rinpoche. And this was a photo from the time, maybe this was like 4 or 5 years ago, and a beautiful memory. Now, this is the Mandala of Medicine Buddha. And in a way, you know, even though we always think of Medicine Buddha in the center, you know, Gil core, so center and periphery. So the great doctor that knows the illness or the, you know, the imbalances of all sentient beings and has at his or her disposal, you know, all the different medicines and even different medical providers. I see this very much in integrative medicine as well. And in the center, seeing our patient that we want to help him or her, not just in physical well-being, but really in physical, mental, and spiritual well-being. And kind of around it, I see, like when I was at MD Anderson, every Thursday morning we would meet, and like all the people around, you know, thinking of what's the best for the patient and the caregiver, like when Bene was here. And so we're thinking of, you know, if you would think around, it would be, you know, like the acupuncturist and the massage therapist and the oncologist and the chaplain and the mind-body therapist and so forth, and having what is better for not only the patient, but the whole support group. So patient and caregivers. And so how can we help them? And that's the way that I see there's a huge, beautiful link. And I want to thank His Holiness the Dalai Lama to kind of help me look through this. Now, in 1977, there was a famous article by George Engel, a psychiatrist, that really put much more emphasis in the Western world in thinking that health was not just in the physical realm, but really was at that intersection of the physical, the psycho-spiritual, and the social. And that was really very important for us who are in integrative medicine, as well as the openness that His Holiness the Dalai Lama has in these dialogues that then became the Mind and Life Institute. Actually, tonight he's going to have a program through the Mind and Life Institute. So it's a wonderful synchronicity. But also the work that Herbert Benson, who was famous for the relaxation response, but also for doing the study on Tumo and this Tibetan practice of how the mind can affect the body through this practice of inner heat. And I remember actually in the first Congress of Tibetan Medicine, where Dr. Benson presented that, and His Holiness was the main speaker. And one thing that His Holiness said that I thought was funny, he also, besides his wisdom, he has, as most of you know him, he's very funny. And he said, you know, thank you for inviting me to this conference, the first, what you're calling the first International Tibetan Medicine Conference, but actually this was not the first because the first one was in the 7th century. So there's a whole history of how these practices and these dialogues, and I think this aspect of dialogue, and as you've been calling this East and West, is really, really important to understand better how we understand ourselves and others. And so in integrative medicine, we started with something that we called place of wellness. And really it was just that, a place where patients could feel better, feel well. And actually what brought me to the center was originally when my dad was diagnosed with cancer in 1998, which was the same year that Namkha Norbu Rinpoche was diagnosed. And so it was for me a very impactful time. And actually my dad luckily is still well, and we'll celebrate Father's Day in a couple days. And Namkha Norbu Rinpoche was really instrumental for me in how do we bring what this Tibetan meditation into this center. Here you also see Gabriel Lopez, who's our medical director there, and some of the different things that we do at the Integrative Medicine Center. So we moved from being a place of wellness to really becoming an integrative medicine center. And really, it's part of a much broader group of integrative medicine and health. You mentioned how Debu was actually one of the presidents of SIO, the Society of Integrative Oncology. And so that's really specific on integrative medicine in oncology. And there's also the Academic Consortium of Integrative Medicine and Health. And just to let people know that one of the important aspects of that is the relationship, of course, of the practitioner and the patient, and the focus on the whole person, but informed by evidence. And in that way, making the best use of all the approaches, providers, and disciplines to achieve that optimal health and healing. So in that way, again, that mandala, so really thinking of the whole person, but really evidence is really important part. And so, how do I move forward? So when I was doing my PhD, I focused on particularly this text called the Shang Ninju Trunkor. And so again, also the Shang relationship with the Shang Institute. And there's a particular group of Tibetan yogic practices. And through that, Lorenzo asked me to do a program specifically for cancer patients, thinking really from the income perspective that mind-body practices are these techniques designed to enhance mind's capacity to affect bodily function and symptoms. So NCOM, for those of you who don't know, is the National Center for Complementary and Alternative Medicine, that it's now called the National Center for Complementary and Integrative Health. So mind-body practices are an important part of how we see health. And so we started in the late 90s with programs, randomized controlled trials of using this Tibetan yoga, first in lymphoma patients with the help of some of the doctors at MD Anderson, and also later in breast cancer, the area that Debu is now the chair. And so it was a combination. It was really a collaboration between MD Anderson and the Ligmincha Institute of Tenzin Wangyal Rinpoche. And One of the important things to mention is that even though in the West we talk about these as mind-body practices, I do want to emphasize the aspect that how in Tibetan we talk about mind energy body practice, energy being this link between mind and body, as well as the way it expresses itself through breath and speech. So mostly today I'll talk about mind, breath, body practices, but I'll at the end mention something about speech as well. So this was our first published study in 2004 of Tibetan yoga in patients with lymphoma, where Dr. Alma Rodriguez was very instrumental also. And so what we did, it was a randomized controlled trial of people using Tibetan yoga and people who didn't and continued doing their standard of care. And the main finding was sleep, better sleep quality, better sleep quantity, better sleep latency, which is the moment that you want to go to sleep until you fall asleep. I have to admit, I didn't realize how important that was. I was much younger, and but it was very, very important for the patients. And actually, it gave us a lot of press, and with that, we continued doing research with women with breast cancer, and eventually got an R01, which is a large grant from the National Cancer Institute to really investigate these effects further, and particularly in women with breast cancer undergoing chemo, because in our we had a small pilot study in breast cancer before that was both with chemo and radiation, and we noticed that the ones in chemo could improve more. So we focused on that population. And one of the things that we did is we really did focus on going deeper and looking, teaching these women about their inner channels, teaching about the 9 breathings and how those can release anger, attachment, and confusion. Very important from a Tibetan medicine perspective, from a Tibetan yogic perspective. And also the 5 kinds of breath in the same way as we see in Tibetan medicine, the upward moving lung, the life force lung, the fire and equanimity lung, the downward and clearing lung, the pervasive lung, and how each one connects through the chakras into the whole body. And so there's different movements that we do that we call tsalung and trunkor, tsalung meaning kind of nadis or channels, and lung and prana, and trunkor magical movements, or these yogic practices that support this lung helping and maybe healing through that. And so we then published an article that was really interesting, because what we realized in these patients with breast cancer undergoing chemo is kind of the dose response. And many clinicians, and maybe Debu can attest to this, what they're looking is, okay, now I know that you've done this research that is important. How do I bring it to patients? So we have ways of including it within the Integrative Medicine Center, but also telling them you at least need to, at least from these results, you need to practice at least 3 times a week. If you practice 2 or less, you won't get the same effects. So I think that's an important aspect. And then finally, we're trying to see what happens. Can we have changes in the brain? And particularly the work of Richie Davidson at the University of Wisconsin with Mathieu Ricard, who many of you know, they found that there's really significant differences in meditators, particularly this finding happiness, cajoling your brain to the left. And we were looking, what in our patients can we do in terms of brain? What are their issues? And one of the main issues is what we call chemo fog or chemo brain, which is really the cognitive cognitive problems due to the chemotherapy. And so again, collaborating with the Ligmincha Institute and Tenzin Wangyal Rinpoche in particular with sounds, and these are Tibetan sound healing practice with this 3 sounds of Ah, Om, and Hung. And basically what we did, it was a randomized controlled trial with women with breast cancer undergoing chemo, noticed that they had this difference. And so through these practices, what we noticed is that we were able to improve, or they were able to improve their short-term memory as well as peak cognitive function, as well as reduce other aspects of intrusive thoughts and improve their spirituality. Again, we published this in 2013 in Psych Oncology. And it's been a study that we also did in Brazil, and we are finalizing the results. But what's interesting is that as we wanted to deeper in this study, what NIH told us is, you've done your research. It's very clear that this is helpful. So in a way, it was the good and bad news, because they didn't keep on funding us, but they said that this was helpful. And so this is some of the results of the working memory and speech cognitive function. And finally, I want to mention one more study, which was about patient and caregiver. And so a lot of times we think of this aspect of connection, both inner connection as we meditate, connection with others. And particularly thanks to the work of Catherine Milbury, interested in it, we joined forces and we said, what about looking at both connections and doing a study where it's not just about the health of the patient and how the caregiver helps, but the patient of both. And so when we were teaching them, we had them in front of the instructor, but then we asked them to face each other. And when they did, besides the results that I'll show, they were connecting. They were reaching each other's, through the hand or touching their toes. And we found that that was not only very nice, but actually very significant in their relationship. And so both in patients and caregivers, there were significant clinical levels of improvement in fatigue, sleep, and depression. Also, one of the important things is not thinking just Tibetan yoga or just yoga. So how do we do it as a lifestyle? And so together with Lorenzo Cohen as the PI, we have this comprehensive lifestyle program that includes meditation and yoga, includes diet, includes exercise, and also a health psychology to put it all together. And finally, particularly today, Juneteenth, I wanted to mention that we are working also in this area that we called Harmony and Health. And together with Lorna McNeil, who's now actually the chair of health disparities at MD Anderson, we put a program for African-American community, particularly that were going to church. And we did this study that purposely, we didn't call it mind body or Tibetan yoga. We called it Harmony and Health. And because we didn't want to use the word yoga, we didn't want to use meditation. And it was very well received for the patients. In fact, one of the patients told the instructor that these are great things. It actually reminds me of yoga. So sometimes we overthink, I think, too much when we're looking at these studies, but I think it's very beautiful that we can reach out to different communities as well. And so finally, there's different ways of getting this information. We have a newsletter at MD Anderson. We have different classes now. Of course, through COVID, we don't have them, but they hopefully will come again. And bringing what we learn in the clinic, bringing back what we learn in research, bringing it back to the clinic through the practices of breathing, through the practices of sound, through the practices of movement. And so these are the different practices that we bring to the clinic. We have a website that is still available and people can look at the different practices, mdanderson.org/integrative med center. And we're doing an app that we are also doing a research with Dr. Gabriel Lopez to looking about how Tibetan meditation can reduce aspects of anxiety. And so through that, I started the Mind, Body, Spirit Institute, really looking at almost like a CPR, but not cardiopulmonary resuscitation, but compassionate professional or compassionate personal renewal, using these practices to not just CPR, but eventually flourish. And the idea of flourish is that even if we are in the mud, like the lotus flower, we can still grow and flourish. So creating that favorable environment to grow and thrive, and not just for oneself, but for the whole community. And in a way, this is the vision that I have through the Mind, Body, Spirit Institute, that we all, if we need CPR, we do CPR, compassionate professional renewal, to then kind of flourish, not just for ourselves, but for, in a way, as we would say in Buddhism, for all sentient beings. This is the book, and that I dedicated to Hisono Sunto Tempanima after he passed away. These are some of the classes that we do, including, for example, different perspectives of mandalas from the Jungian perspective and the Tibetan perspective. There's different courses online with Wisdom Publication and Ligmincha Institute that are available. And with that, I want to thank you. This is a photo that Mathieu Ricard lent me, and he's besides a great meditator, he's a great photographer, and that's all my contact. Thank you very much for your attention, and look forward to the other presentations and the discussion. Thank you.
Dr. Chaol, that was lovely. Thank you so much. CPR, okay. Compassionate, personal, professional renewal. I love it. It sounds like I really ought to take your classes on the Tsalung and Trulkor. It's a fascinating kind of work. So thank you so much. Actually, we had Tenzin Wangyal Rinpoche on our webinar here recently. We had a wonderful conversation. So all in the family, truly inspiring work. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. Well, I think that this is going to be a quite seamless transition here. So now, Dr. Tagliabue, thank you so much for being here. How are you doing today? Oh, let's see. Arik will unmute you in just a second now.
I'm in Barcelona and the day is beautiful.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, so can you please tell us a little bit about this? When I learned about your project, the Kalida Center, and what it entails and its history, I was really just quite enamored. It's inspiring and fascinating. So can you please tell us a little bit about this wonderful project working with supportive care, complementary care for cancer treatment patients right there kind of on site, where they're doing their primary treatments, but then they can go to this wonderful place and get this restorative care and get some personal spaciousness. So can you please tell us a little bit about your work there?
Yeah, this work was really fantastic, especially because it came after a long story, which has to do with Alejandro Chaol, and then also with Dr. Phuntsog, and of course with Chogal Namkai Norbu. Maybe I can start with the story, and it's 20 years ago, my husband was not feeling well, and he discovered he had a brain cancer, and it was a very difficult one. And we went running to Houston, and in Houston we were trying to find the best medical solutions in MD Anderson Cancer Center. But then I found a piece of paper where which was saying the program of a place of wellness. And we both read with my late husband, we read a class of meditation, Tibetan meditation. We didn't know about Tibetan meditation, we knew about nothing, but we were in a very special moment in our life, something that we have never lived before, and we were not prepared. Then we went to this class, and Alejandro Chaol was teaching. And my husband, who was not a person who was, let's say, very much about meditation or this kind of thing, he loved it. And he asked Alejandro Chaol, please, can you come also and make meditation with me at my home? And Alessandro so generally he said yes. Then we became friends, and it was so important because he introduced us into Tibetan yoga, into the world of Tibetan spirit. We were in a difficult moment, and this idea of having a help looking at death was so deep, was so important. And then at the end, my husband died some months afterwards. And thanks to having met Alejandro, I went and visit Chogal Namkai Norbu and the Toscan Mountains, and I became a pupil of this fantastic spiritual master who really was so important to understand the death of my husband, but also to understand my life. And from that moment on, well, I'm an architect. I went on being an architect, but also I was a practitioner. And this project of a place of wellness was so important to me, you know, in our experience with cancer. It was really a moment where we could find ourselves, and especially before death. This was so important. Then in our professional office, a group of women came and visit, and they said they wanted to build in Barcelona something similar to a place of wellness. But it was not called like that. It was called Maggie Center. These Maggie Centers were invented or conceived by a lady who was a landscape architect. So she loved beauty. And while she was with a breast cancer. So she was in a difficult moment. She was Scottish. She was going to English hospitals, and she was saying, I go to the hospital to find a cure for my body, but my soul feels offended because I feel treated like a number. I feel that they don't look at me as a person, and I feel in a very ugly environment. So I am imagining that we could have beautiful spaces next to hospitals where someone who is suffering from cancer and goes to the hospital to find a cure can also find a moment of peace in this beautiful environment with the connection with nature, connection with garden, and with a kitchen, something which is like home, where I can make a cup of tea for myself. So I feel that I'm a person and I do what I want. So this simple idea started to become a reality when Maggie died, and her husband believed in her and created this network of centers next to hospitals. And in UK now you have more than 25. So when these ladies came to my office to propose to design one of them, I was so incredibly happy. And this process started 12 years ago. And finally last year, this place was ready. So I can maybe now start to show you the images. You know a little bit about the story already. So I hope we can have this. Can you see? Can you see my screen?
Yes, that's quite good. Thank you.
Perfect. So this is an image of my late husband. He was an architect and he loved drawings and being immersed in his books and learning and making housing and making buildings, making beautiful spaces. And this is one of the beautiful spaces in Barcelona. He actually brought me and visit this at the beginning of my staying in Barcelona. This is Hospital San Paolo. It was designed at the beginning of the century by a fantastic architect who is called Domènec i Montaner. And there was a donor who asked him, please make an hospital for very poor people, but the hospital has to be beautiful and integrated with nature, so that people who comes here can feel happy about being in a beautiful place. And this hospital is a masterpiece, architectural masterpiece, and was used as an hospital until very recently. But now it was kind of obsolete, so they transformed this in something else, and a new hospital was created just here. So this is a new efficient hospital, and the old one became a kind of institution and like a museum, a place to visit. So they asked us to position here in between the old hospital of Domènec i Montaner and the new one, this cancer center like a place of wellness. And here we have the images of Maggie Keswick and her husband, Charles Jenks, the two architects who loved beauty, who loved fantastic garden and fantastic buildings. and she died with this idea of making new centers. So they asked their friends who were Frank Gehry, Ren Koolhaas, Zaha Hadid, Page and Partners, Foster, to design these little centers with beauty where people could escape from the hospitals. And when we were asked to design something in that piece of garden, we were really trying to make something looking like a flower, looking like a piece of garden that you can inhabit. And at the very end, we had another design, which is more responding to the situation, which is this little center, very integrated with the garden outside and very accessible from the hospital. Actually, this is the shape of the building. And it was not me who discovered that this building could be seen as a bird. You see in the image lower. And the lady who discovered that, she said he looks a little like the open hand by Le Corbusier, who has a very strong symbol. And I remembered that a bird, Garuda, is also one of the possible practices for protecting against the cancer. So this was, if this was so, it was totally unconsciously. This came out without thinking. But this is the plan of the building. So we wanted the building to be very, very open, you know, like a van opening towards the nature and the beautiful part of the hospital. And here is the image of the building, how it is now. The hospital is there on the right side. The people with cancer receiving the oncological cures can look at this place and see this colorful green roof and the garden, and then they can escape from the hospital building, go down with the elevator and enter this center, which is kind of very secret from the garden. But then when you enter inside, you really have all these protected places, pergolas, garden, this building kind of protecting you, giving also some ceramic decoration, which is letting you see through, but people not seeing you inside. So you have this openness, but also protection in the same time. And here you can find what we have found in this fantastic place, which was a place of wellness, where Alejandro Chaol was welcoming us 20 years ago. So in the inside, the kitchen is a very important part. Here you can have your cup of tea that you make yourself, or your cup of coffee, and you can sit together with other people who are in your situation, or you can find volunteers who will help you or let you alone if you wish. It's as if it's a very big, unique room, but also you can find many different corners in order to find yourself alone or with one friend, or with a kind of a group of people who is doing a therapy together. And the garden is very much near, very much integrated, so that you have this presence of nature and light, and also very nice materials, so that you have this feeling that ceramic and wood is kind of also helping you in a feeling of being at home, feeling well, and trying of healing together with all this physical presence. So this is the building that we have designed, and now it is actually working. This was the opening, which was using the therapy room. It was like the first therapy. But before saying goodbye in this presentation, I also wanted to show another project which was very, very significant to me, and it's still going on. It's partially finished, but not totally. In 2012, Professor Chogal Namkai Norbu, who was my spiritual master, who is my spiritual master, he bought a land in Tenerife, and the land was kind of an abandoned site with ruins of buildings that never finished. And this was very courageous. It was very, very big land. And Chagal Namkhai Norbu decided to go on with this with no fear, that this was the future center for the Dzogchen community. So here on top of the ruins of what should have been an hotel, now there is the main hall, the Gompa of the community. And what the master was imagining was that in the middle of this, on the bottom of this building, a medical center, a wellness center with integrated medicine should happen. So now this building is existing. This Gompa is usable. And as you see, it's all designed with natural material. And in the future, a lot of gardens will grow here. And we hope that in the very near future, underneath this medical center, this integrative wellness center will happen under the symbol of the long sail. So this is some of the last images, the inside of the Gompa, and the reflection of the blue sky and the sea and the wonderful climate of Tenerife, and the hope for this center to really become a place where integrative medicine could happen, maybe with wonderful doctors like you, and of course, Dr. Phuntsog, who I met during this year's next to Chogal Namkhai Norbu. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Tagliabue. That was lovely. Such beautiful imagery. And it's really so inspiring, this incredible center. As we know, in many cancer treatment centers in a regular hospital, it's just really not the most pleasant or salubrious environment to be. So having this type of resource is just very inspiring. My heart is truly warmed by your presentation. Thank you so much.
And this was very important to me, to be with such significant persons and so very important things from my life. Thank you. Thank you, Alejandro. Thank you, Phuntsog. Thank you, Adam. Thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you, Ben. And it was beautiful to get to see it in person last year. So
yes.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
All right. So, well, okay. So now I'd like to continue our discussion, and we'll talk with our director of the Shang Institute School of Tibetan Medicine, an incredible practitioner of traditional Tibetan medicine and teacher, and also my teacher of Tibetan medicine, who I've learned so much from. Menpa Phuntsog Wangmo, thank you so much for being with us here today. How are you today?
It's so good. Thank you very much to be here, honored. And there's such wonderful people. So be with such wonderful people is like a gift, is a treatment. So thank you very much. So thank you. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. So Menpa Wangmola, so in traditional Tibetan medicine, we have a lot of understanding about chronic stress and the effects of the disturbing emotions like a fear and anxiety. And then this can really long-term disrupt our health from an elemental perspective and can lead to developing the chronic disease such as cancer and other health problems. So would you like to share with us a little bit today, just your insights from the perspective of traditional Tibetan medicine about some of these topics of the fear and the stress and disturbing emotions, how that transforms into chronic disease, and then, of course, how we can treat that and how we can avoid this problem and what we can do. Please tell us just a little bit from your expertise.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, so the Tibetan medicine understanding of the cancers, tumors, so this kind of like chronic disease, a lot of things, yes, as you said, is we believe also contributed by the stress or this kind of things. The reason one we says dang is similar so in our body we have one sort of like energy or substance which we call is the dang. Dang means is sort of like a radiance. If you have sadness, anxieties, depressions, or stress, so on and so forth, that can causing to lose that dang. So dang is like energy, sort of like life force. And then that dang is looks like very similar with what we say now is like the immune systems. I'm not sure 100% how the works immune system, but the Tibetan medicine dang is like there's a lot of explanations. Dang is for the physical function, dang is for the mental function, dang is for the verbally functions, energy functions. And then also dang is a function for the beyond than what we can see, what we can feel. So dang is like talking with the Tibetan medicine, and then dang is talking with the Buddhism, and then so then dang is a huge topic. So conclusion sort of like that once you have stress so on and so forth, can lose the dang. Why? Because once you worry or stress, anxiety, that brings or develops a lot of unnecessary wind element into our body. Of course, we are composed by 5 elements. In the general, wind element is one of the 5 elements. It is very important in our body functions. An example, like all the thoughts comes with the wind element, all the energies, all the determinations, all the movements, all the growth, all the changings, everything is related with the wind element, included like circulations of the blood, circulations of the energies. Everything is comes with the lung, that which we call the lung, which is the wind. But then if the excess of that plus is the unnecessary around, and then that will kill the digestive heat, so on and so forth. The reason is that the lung or the wind has the 6 natures or 6 characteristics, but one of them is rough, one of them is cold, one of them is a light, mobile, so on and so forth. So once we have the developed unnecessary cold in our body, automatically the fire losing their powers because there's no rooms, because our body, all the function or the space, everything looks like that the limited, not unlimited. So if there is a lung, which is the wind, access, there's no room to have the access holding there, automatically conquered or kill the fire elements. So that's the reason then we're losing the digestive heat. That means is eventually we cannot digest food. So then develops a lot of dirty things in the body. So this is also one of the cause of all the internal disease. In the Tibetan medicine, we say so the root of all the internal disease is indigestions. Meantime, that roughness, losing, taking away all our bodily constituents, all the body nutrients. Meantime, the light, mobile, causing to not able to sleep. Then later on, like chicken and the egg, not able to sleep brings more wind. No, in the body, no nutrition brings more wind. And then it's sort of like the original wind causing to losing those things. Later lost those kind of things brings more wind. And they became is more sort of like wind. So if that wind develops a lot of things in the body, and in general, when we're looking, our body is like outside when we look in nature of the outer nature. And the Tibetan medicine is like for us is very important outer natures, because we says outer nature is an example of the inner nature. So this outer nature, inner nature, like independent relationships, each other, they depend each other. But outside, we need the wind. We like the wind. But if the too much, then is a natural disastrous. Too much wind is disastrous. Same like thing also we have created like that inner disaster, and then to brings a lot of sufferings. First started with the small sufferings, no sleep, constipations, stiffness, and then brings like restless mental problems, then it brings like the other disease, then end also can losing the life. So all those kind of things, what happening is due to the imbalance of the element. So this is a sort of like that the Tibetan medicine, what we say is the cause of that the chronic disease can relate it with anxiety, depression, so on and so forth, as well as like that the diet and behavior. So now, okay, so that part is sort of like we understand stress is not good, anxiety is not good, but now what we can do avoiding those kind of things sometimes is a very logical. So I mean there is a really connect to the life. But at this point, I think I will tell you my own stories as a like maybe they call them like survivors of the cancers. And back to 2012, I had also breast cancer. I'm one of the patients for the breast cancer. So the reason why I'm saying this one is like as we said before, that the one part the cancer is looks like that the connect to this kind of like a depression, anxiety, like things, and then the other hand also connected to the diet behave, and then the another one also we think there may be also like something provocation disease, something like that the another one, and then sometimes also could be also caused by the your past karma. So the provocations and the karmas maybe is not today is the best topic to discuss short talk, but anyway I just want to say there are also something else could be. So my case is sort of like I don't have really is like a direct connected to have something cancer, these kind of things. But I felt something. One day I was working with a patient, and then no, I was talking with someone, and then they said is in her family she had a one person with a cancer. Soon she said that, and then I felt sort of like my left breast area, I felt sort of like a sort of like sharp, something moved. And then next day I felt something swelling. So then I went to the hospital, and then they said everything's okay. Then after 1 year, again, same thing happened. I was working with a patient. She has a like the breast cancer. And then when I'm working with her, I felt same thing, same spot. And then after that, I went to the hospital and they did diagnostics as like the cancer there. So I really believe this is something also to do with the karma or something happened. I'm not saying is I provocated by the patient. I'm not saying that. Absolutely not. Nothing to do with. This is just, thank God that day I had that feeling. So which is very good. I'm so really thankful those people. And then when I went to the doctor said is I should come with someone to get my result after the diagnostics. I said, okay. And then he said is I have the cancer. I said, okay. And then he said, do you understand English? I said, yeah, I do. And then he said, do you know what means of the cancer? I said, I know. And then I had a friend, she said, no, she knows. So she understands that part well. And then doctor said, okay, so this is the your problems. Then I said, is it treatable or not treatable? He said, it is treatable. So I said, okay, then there's nothing to be worried. Because is it treatable? It's nothing to worry because we treat, that's it. If there's no treatable, also nothing to worry because that's it. You know, this is that another one solution. So then I decided, I said to the doctor, do you believe all those like the labs? Because I don't believe sometimes because I do not know how to use those. He said, I totally believe. I said, if you believe those numbers, I believe you because as a human, I believe you. So then I said, you consider I'm like your sister, and then you give me the suggestions, advice. If I'm your sister, what do you like to do? Then he said, I will do this, that. And then I said, okay, then we start to do that. So those doctor is really, I want to say, is such a great doctors, such a wonderful people, such a really skillful and then kind and then loving. And then also at this point, also I learned a lot that how great the Western medicine doctors. So, and then during that, my things, and then I decided to do everything what the Western medicine protocols, because we Tibetan medicine, we do not know what is the chemotherapy, so what is the radiation. So the many people comes to complain these kind of things, but we do not have a ability to help. And then I really wanted taking this opportunity to testing on my body, how I feel, and then maybe future there is a chance I can help to the other peoples. So then I did that. I took sort of like my body as like example. Sometimes I told my students, sometimes they asking, what are you doing these days? I said them, I'm doing a free internship in the Western hospitals. So somehow really I enjoy it because the kindness of those doctors, their skills, all those kind of the really is, I trusted them. So, and then meantime, what I took the Tibetan herbs. I know I didn't took the Tibetan medicines for the cancer because cancer is looks like at the moment is chemo is more than enough to dealing with that. I don't feel like needed another one medicine for that. I thought is need a medicine to protect my entire body, included my mind, and then to maintain my body to protect, to hold. And then my theory is like, if I have strong body, and that will sort of like handle with the disease and especially these medicines. So that's the reason what I took is like a Tibetan herbs. So then also, yeah, the herbs to one sort of like herb to maintain the body. And then my thought is, okay, so according to the Western medicine, like the oncology, the side effects looking, and mainly looks like they attack everywhere, a whole body, included in nails, hairs, and everything they're attacking, like it is a side effect they get. But one of them is looks like all the blood systems. So what I did is took one medicine, herbs, Tibetan herbs further to protect the livers, to clean the blood systems, and they make sure the digestive heat is not losing. So these three is sort of like I try to main sort of like taking the herb supplement to clean the blood systems, to maintain the body strength, and to keep the digestive heat. Because I thought these three is strong. When we're looking like a kitchen is clean, stuff is working, food is clean, then to live in there, it should be okay, no? So this was sort of like my idea. So I did that. I had like 8 times of the chemo. And then now I don't remember, but it's anyway, like that the more than 1 month or 3 months of the radiations. And during all these kind of things, so far I don't get any side effect. So this is also, I really believed, totally believed, helped by the Tibetan herbs. And then meantime, what I try to do, I try to understanding and dealing with that the actual situations, except that, okay, I have this one, which is bad part, I have this one, but it's good part. Hospital is nearby. Doctors are very skillful. They are very compassionate patient, and then why I need to worry. So this really helped me, the number one. if I sick in Tibet or in any another one country, may not the doctor is available. Maybe all those medicines not available. Maybe it's available, but those doctors are may not that much kind. So, and then this one is, I really thought, still I think this is the best place to seek. If you need to seek, this is the best place. So then, yeah, I got really is the disease, but is the best moment, best place. So then this really helped me. Meantime, I do sort of like since I was very young, because I was born in a Tibetan Buddhism family, grown up with dealing with this kind of like that meditation, so on and so forth. Even I'm not the best meditator, even I'm not the best the understanding the Buddhism, but it is still I am one of the followers. So that minimum of my knowledge, understanding of this kind of thing also really helped me a lot. So, and then I took sort of like this, like entire, this my treatment, like oncology treatment is, I felt sort of like a vacation. You know, I felt sort of like so good. And then another one also is any kind of like a medicine, either like a medicine based on the herbs or medicine based on the chemo, what do we call that, the chemical. I try to understand each of those as nectar. Those, even though it's a chemical medicine, it's not made somehow is like a violent way, someone made with good intentions. So this is also for me is very important to understand. And then what I try to do is, what I plan to do is every time before they put the chemo in my body, try to do a meditation, imagining all the chemotherapy that the medicine transform into a nectar enter in my body and then releasing all the problems. But many times when I get there, I'm falling asleep. So then doctors say, oh, you are so calm, because I'm falling asleep. So this is also like understanding this medicine is not chemical. This medicine is a nectar. Because those doctor is very important. Those caretaker is very important. Tibetan medicine, we say is like in the end we pray. Simje nepa chingi pa nesi kurgi pato ne mende memba nida ni te neyo chebarshu. So till ending the samsara sufferings of the samsara, till that point, I wish to be born as like a doctor, medicine, caretaker, and then equipments of the medicine that the doctors filled. So I consider those doctors is not like a regular people. I really consider those doctor has a really good intention. So all those kind of like that, the one, your perceptions, how you thinking those doctors, how you understanding these medicines, and then trusted all those kind of like the team workers. This I think is my own experience helped a lot. And also I tell people do this kind of thing also helped a lot. Another one also is like every time when I go to get the chemo, I take one person with me and then give me a kunye, which is a massage, oil massage. Also, I think Adam also came several times with me. So I take some of them with me. And then when I'm receiving the chemo, and then they give me a massage on the hand, feet, head. So where is that the more access place? So this really I felt is very helpful, because it's during that the chemo and then you're falling asleep because you are so relaxed. And then I totally believe that the relax helped also like smoothing all the vessels, all the body relaxing, like the move the medicine into the body is faster and more smooth. And in the meantime, also like my wind element is controlled. It's not like going up. So this is sort of like part of like the meditations. Of course, if you're able to do everything by yourself, would be great. But if you're not that highly able to do yoga and the tunkor and then so on and so forth, that's simple is someone lets them rubbing your feet. So there for sure, there's no side effect. maybe that you don't need to report to the doctors also. Even you report, they will say, okay, you do that. No? So all those kind of things I think is very useful. So, and the Tibetan medicine, we do this kind of treatment if someone has anxiety, depression, and also stress. So those kind of condition also is like that, yes, it is diet changing is important, behave also important, meditation is important, yoga is important, breathing is important. Another one, if those things not able to deal fast, you work with a certain acute point, do with oil compress. So if you do certain acute point like that before Dr. Chaol, he said those like chakras. Chakra means is like a central station for all the energies, nerves, channel systems. I consider as like a big like central like stations. Of course, if you acute work on that with all your potency or compress, help to release those kind of things. So this also was very useful. Another one, what I want to say also, this is not so much things, my stories, but in generally, we think is always is clean is important, no? That's true, clean is important, especially those days. Every time when you go to out, come back, you need to wash hand. That's true. Every touch to somewhere, something you need to wash your hand. That also important too. When we're talking like a clean, we always understanding like outer cleans. Body need to be cleaned, the hair need to be washed, the clothes need to be changed. But we never think is how we clean our mind. Yes, our physical is we clean constantly twice a day. One time is for sure. And then sometimes twice a day. Every day we change some parts of the clean clothes. Sometimes also twice a day, even sometimes more. But we never change our toxics inside. Our dirty things in our mind, we never clean. And then sometimes instead of to clean that, we bring more dirties there. So this also, I think, is very important. Try to clean your mind, all the toxic things. In the Buddhism, they said is every morning when you wake up, you should thank to the one more day's life. And then every morning when you wake up, then you take a promise, sort of like, say, okay, thank God I have one more day's life. Today, I will try to do something useful things. Every evening comes before go to sleep, you try to think, okay, did I do good, positive things? If I did not, and then say, okay, tomorrow I will do better. Today I did more negative than the positive things. So these kind of also like every morning and then evening you do sort of like a morning you take a agenda, what you do today, and the evening you do in summarize what you did today. So this kind of thing also I think is very important because it's a lot of those problems is connected to our imbalance of our mental aspects, as well as anxiety and so on and so forth. So all those kind of things, I think if we try to clean constantly, our energy would be very useful. So this is sort of like my parts, today's contribution. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Menpa Phuntsog Wangmo. That's really wonderful. What a great personal example of all of these. You really just kind of brought together all the important aspects of what we're talking about today with your personal example. You talked about your own history with the cancer treatment and how we're using some of this Tibetan medicine and supportive care in that context, getting some external therapeutic work, like just a simple hand massage or using some of the oil compress, And then also you talked about using some of the herbal supplements, and you brought up this very important distinction that is so important to understand, using complementary and Eastern medicine in conjunction with allopathic Western medicine treatments, which is that when we use our herbs, we're using this as a supportive care for our treatment. So we're using herbs to support our liver, support our blood, to help balance our wind energies, things like control our nausea and improve our sleep. So you're using these herbs as our supportive care, boost our digestion. And that's, a really important way that we help and work with that. But most importantly, you talked about transforming our kind of mental attitude. And I love how you said this idea of viewing, people associate chemotherapy as being so poisonous and so toxic. That's all anybody ever talks about, is how horrible it does, the side effects, and works for our body. But you're talking about using your mental aspiration to visualize that as really powerful nectar medicine, based on the fact that the people who are administering this, your doctors, you're trusting them, you're trusting their good intention. So you're transforming this, what most people view as a scary, horrible poison, into something that's like a nectar, and you're able to accomplish that visualization and fall asleep during your treatment. So that's so beautiful. Thank you for sharing that with us. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, so now I'd like to move on to our keynote speaker, Dr. Tripathy. Thank you so much for your patience and being here with us, sharing your really valuable time. Thank you so much for joining us. How are you doing today? How are things at your end?
I'm doing very well, and it is really a pleasure to be here. And I really appreciate the opportunity to be able to speak after we have heard these wonderful descriptions and experiences and knowledge from our other speakers, because it allows me to synthesize this together. And a lot of what I do in medicine is about synthesis. It's about putting together information that comes to us from many different directions. As a biologist, I focus a lot on genetics and biochemistry and receptor signaling pathways. But as a clinician that treats patients, I'm very aware of people's inner space, what they're thinking inside, and what their frame of mind is, what their history is in terms of anxiety and depression, and how they are accommodating to their illness and to their new state, because these are such important determinants. And depending on which way you drill down and try to look at an individual, you can get into such a deep level of complexity. For example, we spoke about the importance of maintaining emotional wellness through this, particularly through this time of stress, where we are isolated at home, we're concerned about infection, we're concerned about the future of ourselves and our loved ones. Our emotional state really drives so much of how we feel and what we do. And on a very drill down level, as I mentioned, we know a lot about how anxiety and stress can cause inflammation, can affect our chromosomes, affect our telomeres, which are the ends of our chromosomes that are important in how our DNA divides. And we're trying to harness that information to do some very simple things, like have our patients avail themselves of things that can get her in a better frame of mind. And as you've heard from our speakers today, this is such an important aspect of wellness, the space we're in, as you heard from Bennett, and the programs we can put together, as you heard from Alejandro, and how we think of our own treatments even, are all so critical. So what we can do with this information is, in the spirit of synthesis, is we all need to work together and put our talents together so we can connect the dots. And it reminds me very much of the fable of the blind men that came across an elephant, and each one of them described the elephant in a very different manner, as though it was a totally different animal. Yet they were all simply looking at the same object, and feeling the same object, but from different points of view. And if they had synthesized what they were experiencing, they might have gotten the whole picture. And this is what we need to do in many disciplines of life, whether it's in medicine, whether it's in science, philosophy, literature, is to build bridges. And the best thing that we can all do is listen to each other and learn from each other. And that has been my journey in the work that I have done. As I mentioned, I'm trained really as a Western physician with molecular genetics and biochemistry. My background has been in developing targeted therapy against HER2-positive breast cancer, and more recently in understanding the genomics to see how cells become resistant to some of the treatments we use, and very much in that area. However, I think that my colleagues always benefit and enjoy hearing a totally different side from our integrative medicine colleagues. In fact, we collaborate a lot. So here we have the hardcore biochemistry and genetics people who do clinical trials working with Alejandro and Lorenzo Cohen and his group doing mind-body approaches. And we're treating the same patients actually, but doing different studies on them to try and learn how to put all of this together. So if any message can come together from these stories that you've heard from everybody, is that we all have to maintain our antennas out. We have to be connecting and learning from each other and putting it all together in our minds, because we all have a slightly different reality as to what we believe about everything. And we should, because we all have different minds, we all have different inputs, but at the same time, we want to be as close to the truth, if you will, as possible. Now, what is the truth? The truth is a conceptual thing. There's no formal definition for the true this, the true that. What is the definition of this word? What is the, it's really more a matter of trying to know as much as you can and create your own truth. And the more you know, and the more we all know and share, the more common our truth will be. And when you're talking about making a treatment decision, we heard how important it is to have trust in your doctor, but you can only have trust in your doctor if you feel that your doctor is, as you are, concerned, treating you like his sister, as we heard. And what that means is being aware and being knowledgeable and doing the best we can to be human beings, or to be beings in general. In that we're taking things in and trying to narrow in on the truth, because that's what we seek, whether it's in the religious context or the educational context or the scientific context. We are looking to connect those. So I really learned a lot from these lectures. I think I'm taking in more than I'm able to give out in my summary of these. But what I hope will stay with us is the fact that we are all connected, and that our originality and how we think in creating these beautiful spaces that we heard about in building these integrative programs for health are all very important endeavors. And we should remember as we go in life to pay attention to the small details. And in the middle of a worried, busy day, to look at the flower petals and look at the clouds in the skies and contemplate the shapes of these and try to let our minds wander so that they're open and receptive to making these connections. Because unless your hand is open, you can't grasp something. And this is, you just heard a wonderful example from so many dimensions. So I know that we're getting to the end of our hour here. So the message I would like to leave everybody with is to keep your ears open, your arms out, but think and ponder and make connections, especially in the areas that are not in your comfort zones, the areas that you know the least about. That's where you should be doing the most learning. That's where the biggest opportunities lie. So talk to your colleagues and do a lot of listening and making these connections, because they will ultimately allow you to grow and build your own truth and face your own challenges really with your eyes wide open. So thank you all for inviting me here and for the wonderful teachings that you have offered all of us.
Dr. Tripathy, thank you so much for being with us today. And really, actually, we are not short on time. I would really love it if you could share a little bit more with us. We we very often will go, you know, a little while longer. So I was really curious if you can just maybe tell us a little bit more, because you have such vast experience with treating cancer. And as you said, you're on the cutting edge of the hardcore biochemistry aspect, but then you have these decades of experience with the complementary, the Eastern modalities. So today we've talked a lot about kind of like our view, or I think as they say in allopathic medicine, our outlook to creating these kind of positive mind frames and taking it into our own hands in that way. Maybe you tell us maybe some anecdotes or your just thoughts and experience about how the relationship of our mental, emotional state and taking measures to manage that and improve that is really beneficial with the treatment and prevention of cancer, or just anything else you'd care to share. Can you tell us a little more?
Yes, I can share a little bit of that. And then I would also like to tell you a little bit about my experience of integrating Tibetan medicine into the medicine that I practice, because this was a collaboration with Yeshe Dandan that dates back now 20 years ago. But let me first answer your first question, and that is our frame of mind and anxiety and depression and worriedness and how that impacts on our health. So there's many examples, both in diabetes and cardiovascular disease and in cancer, where one's frame of mind makes a difference, not only in your disease state, but how you perceive your disease state and how you tolerate the therapies and how well you sleep at night. There was a very interesting study that was done at the Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center by a group of individuals that are interested in patient-related outcomes. And patient-related outcomes is a field of study where we learn from what the patient is telling us, because when a patient is in the office, you ask them about these different symptoms and how they're feeling, and you're asking them very pointed questions. And sometimes you're yourself making a category as to how much pain are they having, or how much nausea are they having, and as opposed to letting the patient report it in their own words. And the information you get actually is a little bit different depending on how you ask the question. And these researchers at Memorial Sloan Kettering did a very simple thing. They allowed patients to communicate through the electronic medical records and to log in at any point in time to report how they were doing on many different dimensions of their emotional state, their depressive state, and also their symptoms. Are they having pain? Are they having nausea? How's their sleep going? And it was a very large study, and they followed patients with advanced cancers. So these were lung, colon, breast cancers, the common cancers. And it was this group of patients that they studied. And there was another group that were not offered this option to communicate directly through the electronic medical record. They could do everything else that you normally can do with the electronic medical record in terms of look up your labs and communicate, but they weren't given these questionnaires. And they compared one group to the other, and believe it or not, as they followed these patients over time and they looked at the patients who succumbed to their cancers and the ones that lived, they actually found a higher survival rate in patients who were able to communicate and express their symptoms. Now, in some cases, what the patient communicated was read by the medical team, and if they were concerned about the answers, they'd reach out to the patient and maybe set up an appointment. So the medical team was reacting as needed to the answers, but just the very fact that patients were able to express themselves was proof that that simple line of communication is so important. Now, who knows how far you could take that, because now you could develop an intervention to introduce different relaxation techniques or introduce more education to the patient about their disease state, or maybe a new medication they're on, or if they're on chemotherapy, a side effect that they should be monitoring more carefully. But there's a myriad of things that we can communicate. So that study really has led to a whole sea change now of how we at MD Anderson and many other cancer centers are using electronic medical records to really be a two-way form of communication. I think that should really inform us as physicians and as potential patients and the public at large, how important these lines of communications are. Now, I want to turn my discussion a little bit to the collaboration that I initiated with Yeshi Dandan and his colleagues many years ago. It was really it was actually one of my first introductions to integrative medicine. And I have to credit a mentor of mine for many years by the name of Helene Smith. She's a well-known cytogeneticist. She made some very important discoveries regarding chromosomal structure. She was on the faculty at the University of California at Berkeley. And I got to know her through a collaborative research project when I was just a fellow. I was still doing my training in hematology and oncology. And she confided with me that she actually had a whole alternate world that focuses around Tibetan medicine and Tibetan meditation and the whole Tibetan culture. And she inspired me to actually reach out to Alan Wallace, who was a scholar and translator for His Holiness the Dalai Lama. And we worked through his contacts to actually reach Yeshi Dandan, who had been early in the Dalai Lama's life when he actually egressed out of China and into India and accompanied him, and then set up a clinic in Dharamsala, and eventually became well enough known that he was traveling around the world and seeing patients. And Alan Wallace and Helene Smith introduced me to him, and we had a very brief conversation because he was busy seeing patients, but we instantly agreed on the notion that let's see patients together. Let's take patients that have among the more challenging situations, metastatic advanced breast cancer, and let's treat them together and see if we can understand how Tibetan medicine works. Well, you can imagine the amount of red tape we had to go through to create a protocol and get it through the University of California, San Francisco Institutional Review Board, and all of these things that had to be done. But nevertheless, after about a year, we were able to get the trial off the ground. And it was a very simple study. We took patients who had metastatic breast cancer, but were at a point in time where they might not need to be on chemotherapy or a harsh type of treatment. They were sort of in a state where they had maybe responded to treatment and were feeling well enough to be off treatment. And the only thing they would be getting then would be Tibetan medicine. And we watch them very closely. And these had to be patients that didn't have a lot of symptoms from their cancer. And we got scans on them and followed them closely. And we'd see how long how well they responded to the Tibetan therapy. And it was just a pilot study. It wasn't large enough to do any statistical analysis. Our main goal was just to see if it was feasible and safe. And then if it were feasible and safe, we do a larger study. And this is typically how we address research. So we started the treatment, and somehow or other, the press got wind of it, and the film crew of 2020, the TV show, started following us around, and they ultimately did a segment on it, but they were sort of in the background, and Dr. Dandan and I were talking and conferring about patients without watching them, and it was quite a spectacle, however, I must say. But one of the most interesting facets of doing this project was simply working with Dr. Dandan, and he wanted to see all the CT scans of the patients. I mean, he really wanted to get into it just like I was getting into it. He wanted to know what their creatinine was and what their liver function tests were. And I wanted to know what formulas he was using to give them. And we were truly working together, although he was really rendering the treatment, but he was personalizing it in the Tibetan fashion, doing an examination of the tongue and the pulse and the urine, and then composing which formula would best be used. And in so doing that, I learned what an amazing and astute clinician he was, because before he would see the patient, I would, of course, know the patient and their medical record, but he would actually see the patient first and do the examination before seeing their records, and then he'd tell me what he thought about the patient. And in many cases, his perception and understanding of the patient's case was just well beyond what he could have known. I mean, he knew if a patient had liver dysfunction or if their kidneys weren't working or where their cancers were by his exam. And it dawned on me that it reminded me of when I was in medical school. And I was working with these cardiologists who were trained in the 30s and 1930s and 40s before we had all the fancy equipment. And they were able to adapt their ears and their stethoscope to listen to the heart and be able to say, this patient has mitral stenosis and the surface area of the mitral valve is in the 0.4 centimeter range, because they had listened over and over again. And as the technology got better to do echocardiograms, they correlated what they heard to what the findings were. And ultimately they were able to refine their talents. And it was all just based on learning and being very careful about your observations. And it fascinated me how these cardiologists could tell so much about the heart just by listening. And of course, we never got that good, because by the time I went through that, we had things like echocardiograms and all these fancy equipment that did a better job of the ear. But still, those old-fashioned physicians were able to do a lot. This is what Yeshe Dandan was doing. He, over the years, was able to correlate his observation, his pulse taking, with what the patient had. And again, it reminds me of the blind men and the elephant. We're looking at the same thing, but from a different lens, from a different direction. And it really was an awakening moment for me to realize that if we could get different disciplines to talk to each other across all the myriads of training and geography and cultures of medicine, we would each become better at what we do. And to this day, I look for every opportunity to bring us together. And there just isn't enough of it. To people that practice Chinese medicine, that practice Amazonian medicine, that practice physiatric medicine, that and we should all really be getting together and share the commonalities. And the closest thing I can think to right now is the Society of Integrative Oncology, which Alejandro and I belong to and participate in. That's the beginning, I think, of getting people from these diverse disciplines together. But we can even go broader than that. And this exercise that we had today is a good way to bring us together. So that story of how I worked with Yeshe Dandan to do this study was really illuminating to me. So just to finish up on that study, we ended up studying 20 patients, and we found that the administration of Tibetan herbs was safe. We didn't see any side effects. We were monitoring kidney and liver function tests. We actually had one patient that had a shrinkage of their tumor by scans. The goal of our study was to say, okay, it's safe, we can do it. Now let's do a larger study where we can actually look at responses. And so unfortunately, we were never able to get that funded, because to get to that larger study would have taken millions of dollars to get the scans and to get the physicians, the Tibetan physicians that we needed, and to get the lab testing, because we had to subject all the Tibetan herbs to lab testing to make sure there was no mercury in it and no fungus and all of that. So we never got to that stage. I mean, we applied to the NIH, we applied for funding, and that's still work to be done. But it's work to be done in so many areas. We need to do this in Chinese medicine, Ayurvedic medicine, and really learn what the commonalities are and be able to practice what I call multidimensional medicine, multimodality medicine. I think there are so many opportunities there. And I think that as we really come together as a community, and as the technology gets better, and as our communication technology gets better, and our just our openness of our minds is going on to a greater extent, I think we can all as a society really move not only medicine, but other disciplines into this more open type of thinking.
Wow, well, thank you so much, Dr. Tripathy. That's really amazing, and it's incredible to it's wonderful to see a doctor of your caliber and your experience of supporting this multidimensional approach, and that's fascinating work. Yeah, Dr. Yeshe Dandan was a truly famous and celebrated Tibetan physician. I never had the opportunity of meeting him, but I've studied with some of his senior students. But thank you so much for sharing that story with us. And yeah, it's amazing the way that we use diagnostic methods in traditional medicines, Tibetan medicine, Chinese medicine, is in fact very reminiscent of the old school kind of classical allopathic diagnosticians that really had brilliant capacity. In fact, I recently learned that the famous character Sherlock Holmes, who was an amazing, extraordinary sort of detective, was actually based on a famous diagnostician in the 19th century who had that same sort of capacity. So I see a lot of correlation there. And that example you gave of the listening to the cardiac rhythm and heart murmurs and whatnot is something that I often correlates very well with our Eastern medicine approach to pulse palpation. Well, thank you so much for sharing with us. It's been amazing to have you with us. Any last thoughts that you'd like to share before we wrap up here, Dr. Tripathy?
Well, the only thing I would say is to all our listeners and to all of us and to myself, because sometimes we don't follow our own advice, right? Is to, keep an open mind, and especially in this time of stress. This is a time when people, when they're nervous and when they're fearful, as we're seeing during this epidemic, they turn inward and they become isolated. And we're starting to see that as a societal symptom. Studies have shown that just in the last few months, drug abuse, alcohol abuse, depression, and these kinds of things have gone up. And our antidote to that is to stay connected, even virtually. Some people may not view virtual connection as the same thing as real, and I'm sure it's not in many ways, but there are some benefits to it. So we really do have to reach out to all of our friends and colleagues and family to make sure that we maintain this communication. I'm big about education and learning. Imparting knowledge is such an important part. I think that the more I learn, the hungrier I am to learn more. And so, especially when it's of something I don't know about, and especially when it's something I don't believe, I tend to learn more when I'm talking to people who I disagree with. So find someone you disagree with and engage them.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much again for sharing your time with us. It's really, truly been an honor to have you. Dr. Tagliabue, would you like to finish and close with any last thoughts for our audience today?
I think it was really wonderful to be here today, really, because I have great interest in learning about treatment for cancer, all these thoughts. It was fantastic. And it was really putting together a lot of experiences in my life. So I think this lecture today, this webinar, will push me towards being better. And I had this strong feeling.
Wonderful. I completely concur. I think me as well. Well, thank you so much for joining us, and thank you for putting together that lovely presentation and showing us your work. And we'll look forward to seeing you next time. Thank you so much. Dr. Chaol, thank you so much for your presentation and sharing your inspiring work with us. Any last thoughts for our audience before we wrap up today?
Well, again, I'm delighted that we have gotten together. It's almost like a gathering of friends and sharing and learning from each other. It's like, even though we may know each other and their work, there's always more to know. And I was fascinated by each and every one of you, and really this sense of connectedness. And what Debu said, of being open to learn more and to collaborate more. I think we do need to collaborate more, even at the Integrative Medicine Center and other at SIO and so forth. There are collaborations, but I think we really need to expand more. And I want to give a shout for Tibetan medicine. That is one of the ones that is, we know in general, the world knows more about Chinese medicine and about Ayurvedic medicine. Debu mentioned Amazonian medicine. I'm from Argentina, so it's close to there. So, I mean, there's so many native medicines. And I think being open to see what each one does, kind of that first International Tibetan Medicine Conference, where there were Greek doctors and Persian doctors and Tibetan doctors and Chinese and Indian and so forth. You know, these kind of, I hope we could do. And I thank you and the Shang Institute for putting these panels that are so helpful to keep on learning and having both our mind and heart open to this. So thank you. It was an honor to be part of this.
Thank you so much again, Dr. Chaol. And by the way, thank you for your role in bringing this panel together and helping us to organize this. And your inspiration for this panel, I think, largely was related with you. So thank you very much, and we will look forward to seeing you next time.
My pleasure.
Finally, before we close, Menpa Phuntsog Wangmo, thank you so much for sharing your personal stories and your wisdom with us. How would you like to close out today and share with us?
Wow, I learned a lot. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, all the doctors. Yeah, I totally agree. And then I hope something's not too later is soon, something happened, our collaborations. So we all sort of like a goal of our is like to benefit to the third person. It's not something that each of us what we do. So this is not important. Important is how we can benefit to the person, how soon, how fast, how sort of like a safe way. So it's yeah. Our side is always willing to collaborate with each of you. So please counting us either as an individual like a Tibetan medicine practitioner or as institute. So always we are willing to and ready to collaborate. So I just want to say that. So we are very happy, honored to be with your team and then to building these kind of things whenever you need it. Please let us know. And then I understood listening a lot of teachers talking. So important is to building up the compassion, loving kind. So we try, I mean, not we, I will try started from now, sort of like try to building more like loving kind and compassion, try to building up. So also we all try together. So thank you. And then thank you everyone, all your precious time. So I want to say thank you.
Next time in Tenerife.
Yes.
And then
yes, please.
time in Tenerife. Yeah.
Yes, please.
Wonderful. Well, thank you all so much again for your time, and we wish you the best of blessings, health, and stay safe and happiness for the future. Thank you for joining us. And to all of our audience, thank you so much for tuning in. We really welcome your support and collaboration. So this is the Shang Institute School of Tibetan Medicine webinar series. By the way, my name is Adam Okerblom. I practice Tibetan medicine and acupuncture, Chinese medicine here in the San Francisco Bay Area. And I want to say that Menpa Phuntsog Wangmo has been my primary teacher of Tibetan medicine. And anyone out there, if you are interested in learning more about Tibetan medicine, if you'd like to take classes with the Shang Institute, learn from Menpa Wangmo and our other team of teachers internationally, please do check out the Shang Institute School of Tibetan Medicine at tibetanmedicineschool.org. Please follow us on the social media and join our email list. We would love to let you know about our upcoming programs and offerings at any time. We are very thankful for your support, and we wish you all health and safety and a wonderful time this summer. So this is the Shang Institute School of Tibetan Medicine webinar series. Thank you to our guests and to our teachers and to our audience. And we will all see you next time. Have a wonderful day. We'll sign off for now. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Gracias.